A second hot and humid day comes to a close. And now we look forward to the next several days where the chance for a thunderstorm or two or three will start to go up beginning tomorrow. Summer weather covering much of the United States with a few exceptions. And we'll talk about those exceptions. It's pretty hot in the Southwest. That's where all the excessive heat is. And we won't be too excessive here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. Get your truck over to Omni and load it up with mulch and topsoil and sand. If you don't have a truck, use the trunk of your car or use the back seat. Just might be a little messy to clean up. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number for the best prices you can find anywhere. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
And if you want to monitor the heat in your zip code, or more importantly, in your outdoor space at your home, Tempest by WeatherFlow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. They also have all sorts of other electronic weather gadgets and gizmos, plus the latest in smart weather fashion, including the new fall line, which has arrived. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you use the coupon code Joe and Joe Weather Show, Joe Rayo will personally give you.
I'll come personally to your house.
But you won't personally. No, Tempest will give you.
I'll say hi. It's me, Joe Rayo from the Joe and Joe Weather Show. And guess what? If you go to Tempest and say Joe and Joe Weather Show, you'll get 10% off.
Right. It's insane and just incredible. The savings that we're talking about here. Okay, here we are on a Thursday. Another steam bath for you. Actually, it got. Let me see. What it's 74 right now. I didn't see what my high temperature was today. I'll hold on a second. I'm curious to see what it was.
Well, for me, it's the second day of 90+ degree temperatures. We had 93 yesterday. We got to 91 today, which means that if we somehow manage to make it to 90 again tomorrow, then officially it is a heat wave. Maybe.
Well, that 3-day stuff is just such nonsense to me. It's 5 days in my world. So I'm on my Tempest by WeatherFlow app. So today's high, Joe, here was 85.5. And for those of you who don't know, I'm in northeast Georgia in the mountains at 2,200 feet. My low today was 63.3. In the last 24 hours, or so far today, in the vicinity therein, there have been 70 lightning strikes. And I got a whopping 1/10 of an inch of rain. So just to show you, in comparison to your 90. So yesterday, my low was 66.7. My high was 83.3. On the 4th of July, the high was 87.3. The 3rd was 84.4. On the 2nd, 85.8. And on the 1st, for only the second time this summer, 90.5.
Well, obviously the difference being 2,200 feet above sea level versus my paltry 500 makes quite a difference in terms of the heat and humidity, or the humidity. But today I did the lawn today, and when I was on the tractor mower, as I was rolling around, I felt 3 big drops hit my head, and I looked up skyward, and it looked kind of ominous. But that was about all. That's all we got today. And I know that in parts surrounding me, in parts of the region, there was some very localized, very heavy showers, and maybe even some rumbles of thunder, but nothing where I was. So we'll try again tomorrow. But right now, Joe, it looks like that if we're going to see anything of real significance around here, precipitation wise, it probably is going to hold off until Sunday into early next week on Monday.
Yeah, and that still looks like a very rather vigorous system that is probably going to put down a substantial amount of rain for somebody in in the zone of eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. But we got a couple of days to get there, and yeah, I mean we're kind of in this place right now, and it's been sort of the same up and down the East Coast where you get these pockets where you get some thunderstorms that bubble up, and most people don't get anything, but some people do. So, um, they can take their toll if they wind up sitting in one particular spot. Welcome tonight to everybody on the chat board and those of you watching in the background on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We know you're there. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you don't miss the Joe and Joe Weather Show. Why would you want to miss such a spectacular show as ours is beyond me. But we're on Monday through Thursdays at 7:35, Sundays at 11 a.m. And yes, there is weather that goes on Friday and Saturday, but so that Joe and I can at least have 2 days of sanity, we usually take those 2 days off unless there's some ongoing apocalypse in the world of weather. And if there is such an apocalypse, we would certainly let you know if we were going to do an extra show or two. So, you got to love this time of year because the fronts, they don't move. They basically crawl eastward. And this one here to our west, Joe, I'm going to bring up the surface map. Here we go. And this is the 21Z surface map, or the 5 p.m. Eastern time surface map. And, we're kind of still in this no man's land up and down the East Coast. There was a bit more of a southeast wind starting up today. And that might hold, if there's enough of a southeast wind tomorrow, probably will hold the temperatures back just a little bit, but it'll still be very warm and very humid. But, all the way from Maine, you had 90-degree temperatures from Maine. Nobody going to any kind of extreme. It's not like we have places going to 97, 98, 99. It's mostly upper 80s and lower 90s up and down the eastern seaboard and into Florida, which is, it's July the 6th. That sort of is what you would expect. And this first front is now cutting through Ohio and cutting Kentucky and Tennessee in half. This one approaches tomorrow. It doesn't really have the kind of support that would produce widespread thunderstorm activity.
And I did notice that we'll see SPC in a moment. I mean, we're all under a general thunderstorm coverage here for the next couple of days, but you're right. There's nothing along the Atlantic seaboard that would seem to suggest that we're going to be seeing anything organized in terms of, let's say, clusters or possible supercell activity, or even a squall line. Whatever pops up, and that's what's going to happen. It's just going to pop up. And because it's so humid out there, you get about 10, 15, 20 minutes of a hard downpour, but just as quickly as it develops, it probably will move out, and they'll be back to the same old muggy weather pattern.
Yes, and behind
Jason Schaefer says on the chat board, it's like lukewarm soup.
Pretty much. Behind this front, though, if you're lucky enough to be in, say, Chicago today, where the wind was coming off the lakes and temperatures at 5 o'clock this afternoon, it's 79 at O'Hare with a dew point of 62, which is not bad. And then just go a little bit further north than that into Wisconsin, central and northern Wisconsin. Temperatures are in the upper 60s and low 70s with dew points in the 40s. Now that's nice. And it's comfortable across Minnesota, through the Dakotas, through Iowa, Nebraska. Starts to see the dew point start to inch up a bit as you move your way down through Kansas. The northern half of Missouri is on the dryish side. The southern half of Missouri, not so much. And then, of course, you see where the frontal boundary is. It becomes stationary across southern Arkansas, snaking through North Texas, and then back up through New Mexico and into western Colorado and Utah. So a little bit of a cooler air mass. Unfortunately, that high and that dry air is not going to make it to the East Coast because of everything that's going on down the road. And on the satellite loop tonight, I'll let's do a quick refresh so I get you an updated loop. Uh, Pretty quiet in the Northeast. There's a thunderstorm here and a thunderstorm there, and way inland. But other than that, it's fairly quiet, even down along the Carolinas. There's scattered stuff in parts of Kentucky and across the Gulf states, a little more organized in southern Mississippi and back over to Louisiana near where that frontal boundary is. But, from the standpoint of shower and thunderstorm activity for late afternoon and evening on a day like today, it's really not doing a whole lot.
Yeah, and in fact, I was just reading the technical discussion out of Upton, the National Weather Service New York forecast office, and they were actually describing today, Joe. I mentioned a few minutes ago the fact that there were localized showers and storms popping up, and they made reference to this as pulse thunderstorms and downpours, which they noted would slow down heading into late afternoon and evening as instability is expected to decrease. Of course, as the air cools, then there's less pulsing, I presume.
Right.
I would presume also that we're probably going to see the pulsing increase again tomorrow as the temperatures start to once again climb in the midday and afternoon.
I always used to like sometimes in the summertime you get the sea breeze front that forms over Long Island where you get these thunderstorms that are literally maybe about 2 or 3 square miles in terms of coverage, and they look like little dots on the radar, and all of a sudden you got this one little reddish purple dot, and the life cycle of the thunderstorm from start to finish sometimes could be in as little as an hour. It just pops up, runs its course, and then disappears.
Double F thunderstorms.
Yes.
Fruit fly thunderstorms.
Pretty much, yeah. The Northeast satellite loop, as we let me see if this is the regular one. Let me go to the flash one so we could see where the lightning strikes are, if there are any. And you could pick out. I've got the Atlantic seaboard look here, and a couple of storms there in western Mass and southern Vermont, which actually kind of came and went pretty quickly from the start of the loop to the end, about 3 or 4 hours and done. You see a couple of scattered cells in Pennsylvania and also down in parts around eastern Maryland on the Delmarva Peninsula to southeastern Virginia, and also coming and going relatively quickly. And then you see some more cells back in parts of Ohio and Kentucky, but again, nothing really crazy from that respect. And the radar tonight, let's take a look at what's going on radar-wise. And you see the speckling in the Northeast. There's a bit of a cluster in central Pennsylvania, another one in western Pennsylvania. But I'm not seeing any yellow boxes. I'm not seeing any green boxes, so we don't have any severe thunderstorm warnings that are up. In the Southeast, I had a thunderstorm. I had a couple of them around me about 2 hours ago. I could hear the thunder going on, and we got a little bit of rain, but it really wasn't much. And now most of that's just gone. I mean, there's not that much going on in Georgia tonight in the whole state. Typical stuff in Florida, nothing to write home about there. Looks like a bunch of heavy thunderstorms. Ooh, it looks like it's east of Birmingham, so it looks like it might be near Buc-ee's on I-20 at exit 144. Might be in the middle of a thunderstorm or just getting out of it. You see that little red splotch there right over I-20. And in Louisiana, now that's an interesting looking line. Look at this line that goes from northeast Texas, east-southeast, cutting right south of Shreveport in Louisiana, and then goes east-southeast from there. It's just like this narrow stick of thunderstorms. That thing can't be more than about, a handful of miles wide, but shows up really well on the radar.
It does. It certainly does. I was just looking on the chat board again, and one of our people, it came and it went. I did. Oh yeah, Lindy. saying that he watched the Weather Channel today and was talking about a massive Sahara sandstorm traveling toward this area. I'm presuming this area meaning the mainland United States. Would like to know more about it. Thanks. So if you give me a chance to, if you give me sharing capabilities, Joe, I could show you on the GOES 16 satellite. Now, actually, it doesn't show now because they're in darkness. But I did manage to get a frame, and I think you can actually see this.
You're on the air.
This Gigunda sandstorm that was being mentioned by Lindy. And you take a look at this. Now, again, this is here's the Terminator. This is the line that separates daytime and night. And this was several hours ago. But here's Africa. This is the African coastline. And yet, look how clearly, I'm presuming that this is the sandstorm that is being referenced. Look how clearly it shows up over there. Now, we've seen Sahara dust storms and sandstorms before, but this one really, I mean, if you didn't know any better and took a quick look, you'd almost think that this was the west coast of Africa because it stands out so much against the blue of the ocean. But if this is what they're talking about, now I don't know whether or not this is actually going to be able to make it all the way across to the mainland U.S. or even to North America, but this does look like a fairly substantial zone of dust or sand or whatever out over the eastern Atlantic right now.
There hasn't been as much of these. You know, a lot of times in June and July, you see fairly large areas of dust. It doesn't seem to be as much this year. Now, I don't know, just sort of related to this was the fact that I don't know if you saw this, but Colorado State University updated their hurricane forecast for the season, and they raised their forecast now from, I think it went from 14 to 18. So they're now forecasting an above average year.
Now, do you get the idea, Joe, that, you know, the rules that we used to...
They're not working.
I mean, the El Nino. Oh,
they're not working.
No, nothing is working not just this year, but in other years as well. I mean, it just, La Nada, El Nino, La Nina. It does, you can't. It doesn't seem like you could use them anymore.
Well, I've never been a firm, my own personal opinion, for what it's worth. I happen to think it's worth a lot, but that's because I'm self-centered. But my opinion, as far as rules were concerned, has always been I've never been a fan of rules in the weather world. Because we have this, it's supposed to be that. And as you pointed out, in the last number of years, we've had a number of instances where those rules didn't work very well, if at all.
Right.
And so I just think from a standpoint of forecasting, if you fall back on those rules all the time, you're going to wind up missing things that happen, because you're going to say, well, that can't happen because we've got A, B, and C, and then it winds up happening, and then you start scratching your head, which is I'm about to do now because it itches. But then you scratch your head wondering, well, how in the name of God did that happen? Yeah, it does seem we've already had two storms in the month of June in the tropical Atlantic, which is almost unheard of, and we've already seen that happen. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like things are just not working the way they're supposed to.
Right, and I have no idea, William Huber, on the chat board. He writes, what happens when sand meets smoke?
In the Northeast? Well, you know what? Let's not. Let's not go into that. It'll start another round of wholesale panic.
Well, they're already doing that to the mainstream media. The third consecutive day that today was the hottest temperature worldwide on record. And I know I'm not going to get an answer by talking to the TV screen, but my question is, okay, that sounds interesting. How far back does the record go?
No, this supposedly, from the articles I've read, It was the warmest day in 10,000 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
So we had records back 10. Well,
right, no, but they had
dendro,
just examining tree rings and all this all the other stuff that
dendrochronology.
they right.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, to say the way it should be worded is the hottest temperature in weather recorded history. If you want to do it that way,
right.
but all it does is just it starts arguments.
You see, but if that's the case, if indeed what you're saying over the last like 10,000 years or whatever, they're basing a lot of that on dendrochronology, then they really can't do that because what they've been doing over the last 3 days is they've been measuring this in fractions of a degree. 66 point whatever 3. Yesterday was 66.1. The day before 65 point. And so I didn't know that you could actually get it down that close using tree rings. You know what I'm saying?
Look, I mean, maybe somebody 10,000 years ago had a Tempest by Weatherflow weather station, and then and then they could take out their stone apps and mark on the history on the stones what the temperatures were in Roman numerals, of course.
Yeah, it's
Well, I was reading. We'll get back to the weather in a second, but just to go on this subject line since we're on it, and then I was reading an article. I was reading an article the other day about decreasing snow cover in the northern hemisphere.
yes, I read
Did
that.
you read that? Did you also happen to read the part where they basically said that they had to make it up because the satellite data that they had was not good? It didn't take
Yes,
it couldn't measure the snow from the mountains. It wasn't showing up. So we just basically made it up. All right.
right,
Well, that really adds value to it. Uh,
right.
yeah. Look. I just want to. This is above my pay grade in a lot of ways. When I read this stuff, I just find myself shaking my head. But on the other hand, to be fair, I'm not a climatologist. You're not a climatologist. We know our weather and we know about climate, but we're not experts at climate by any stretch of the imagination. That's a whole different genre. But when I read some of these articles, and unfortunately, you can't even blame the people that write the pieces, the articles, because if they're written by journalists who have no weather knowledge, they pretty much, and they may not even be doing it intentionally. They just, they don't understand it. They kind of botch up they misquote things. So it's a mess. It's a
It's
mess.
it's the way it has developed. I mean, it was the lead story on the CBS Evening News tonight, the heat, and again, also indicating it was the hottest in the history of the world or whatever. But I also said, again, talking to the TV screen, I knew nobody was going to answer back. I said, hey, you know what? It's July. And I just
Well,
mentioned it a few days, and a few days ago, I had mentioned we were talking about on Briller Jeopardy, the hottest temperature ever in New York City, 106 on July the 9th, 1936. And I pointed out also the next day, the Triborough Bridge opened in New York. And I wonder if we had the same kind of social media and same kind of coverage that we have now back then, if they had probably let off the news that night, not with the opening of the Triborough Bridge, but hey, my goodness, it's hot. You know, I mean, what else are you going to say in July? Yes, we know it's hot. Yes, we know that there are going to be places in July that are going to have triple digit temperatures and there are going to be, people suffering. And we're very saddened about that. We don't want to see people suffer or anything, but it's part of life in July that you would expect to see extreme temperatures. And that's exactly what we're
right.
seeing now.
Yeah. I mean, we also have to remember as well that we're sort of U.S. centric in our minds. If it doesn't happen in the United States, or even more specifically, if it doesn't happen in New York, apparently it doesn't happen at all. But there are heat waves going on that are, far more excessive than what's been happening what happened across the South, which, from my standpoint and my experience over the years, that was not a big heat wave by any stretch of the imagination. But we can argue that on another time. But there are places where the heat's been in China, then in Japan, and so uh
Could you mind? Do you mind if I just leave for a minute or two, because Mrs. Rayo is at her German club board meeting right now, and she's not upstairs. I'm
She's not
hearing.
bored, is she?
No,
Okay,
no.
she's at the board
Believe me,
meeting. Okay,
I've actually been.
she's not bored at the meeting. She's at a board meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
I've actually been to the meetings, these board meetings, and believe me, you can't get bored. But I hear the dog. He's scratching.
All right, go. I'll just
I'll
go
be
and
right.
just yap when
I'll see
you
what he's doing.
just yap when you get back. In the meantime, we'll go back to the radar, and here we go. This is not the Ed Sullivan Show, wherever we just go with the flow here. You got to go, you got to go. All right, so back on the radar. Here's the activity just as we started all of this was back over in Louisiana and parts of Arkansas. That's still happening. We've got some showers and storms breaking out across Wyoming and into Colorado, and that's where our friends at the Storm Prediction Center are indicating risk area for tonight. As we take a look, they've got a couple of severe thunderstorm watches up for the eastern half of Wyoming and northeastern quarter of Colorado. That area is under a slight to enhance risk. We have a small area of marginal risk, which is covering those thunderstorms we showed you in Louisiana, and then the general areas up and down the East Coast where we've got all the popcorn stuff. And here's the map, which has the tornado risk, which is actually 2 to 5% in that slight to enhance risk zone in Wyoming, Colorado, and down into southwest Kansas and in the Oklahoma Panhandle. Now, for tomorrow, so this is Friday into early Saturday, SPC has got a marginal risk from northern part of Minnesota across into the Dakotas. So pretty much throughout much of the northern and southern plains, you got the slight risk in Oklahoma, southwest Kansas, eastern Colorado, northwestern Texas, and northeastern New Mexico. And I think that comes with a little bit of tornado risk. Let's take a look. Yeah, there's an area of 2% tornado risk there. SPC's also added a marginal risk from south central New York State near the Pennsylvania line, northeastward into northeastern New York and northwestern Vermont for tomorrow, with general thunderstorms indicated from Maine down to Florida. So, most of what we'll see tomorrow is probably going to be on the scattered side. Might be a couple of clusters here and there. And then for Saturday, the slight risk runs from the western plains across Oklahoma into Arkansas. Now, if you look at the shape of this, okay, the shape of this is just like what I'm drawing here with this arrow. This is really this kind of shows you how far that we've been talking about the influence of the jet stream coming down out of Canada being further south than it normally would be. Well, it's going to be running in this position. There's an upper trough that's going to be swinging eastward. This is going to make the turn up through the mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast for Sunday. And it actually looks like a fairly vigorous system that'll be moving up there. And WPC, the Weather Prediction Center folks, have gone pretty bullish here with rainfall amounts from northeastern North Carolina up through the eastern half of Virginia, the eastern half of Pennsylvania, New York State, into New England. Little less along the immediate coast, but the purple is 1.5 inches, and the reds are 2.5 to 3 inches. So they are forecasting a fairly sizable amount of rain here from this vigorous system that's going to come up for later Sunday night into Monday. Also, from the southern plains southeastward into the central Gulf states, we've got another area of 1.5 inches to as much as 3 inches over the next 7 days. Now, bear in mind that there's always variability with this stuff. So some places get more and some places get less. Even though they officially put in their forecast 2 to 3 inches, if you get into a thunderstorm with a really heavy downpour, this is where you wind up with spots that could easily get double that amount. Not saying it's going to happen, nor do we know.
Rarely triple.
And every once in a while, yeah, you get some really crazy off the wall number. But certainly you have, when you're dealing with a vigorous system in the upper atmosphere this time of year, and a fairly solid flow of tropical air up the eastern seaboard, you have to ask yourself whether there might be some heavy downpours that'll be enough to cause some flash flooding. And actually, now this only goes out, this is the Saturday forecast, okay? So this only takes us to actually early Sunday morning. But you see where they've got the risk zones for flash flooding here, marginal to slight risk. So this kind of tells you, the shape of how the upper pattern is. And WPC has actually added a marginal risk, which is 5 to 15%, into ending early Sunday morning, the forecast period. Northeastern Virginia, and then up through eastern and central Pennsylvania, just kind of skimming western New Jersey, and then on up through upstate New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and up into northern Maine. So, and this is early in the game. So I suspect tomorrow when they do their forecast that we'll probably have, I would bet, Joe, that they'll have a slight risk of flash flooding up in their forecast, and also a fairly large area of slight risk for flash flooding in that area from Oklahoma and southern Kansas east to the Tennessee Valley and into the Ohio Valley. So this is going to be interesting to see how this evolves and what kind of rainfall amounts we get out of this.
And with all of the wet weather that we've had over the last couple of weeks, and I know you remember not the last week, but the week before, there were places in New Jersey that had like 3 to 6, 4 to 7 inches. I mean, I would have thought, with all of that the drought scenario would have been put to bed, at least for the moment, here in our neck of the woods. And I was very surprised. Today is the day when they released the new drought maps from the Climate Prediction Center.
Well, let's show our studio audience what those drought. Yes,
I'm going to do that, but you're going to be in for quite a shock.
The problem when it rains that heavy is that a lot of it runs off.
That would be the only thing that I could think of as to why it's not the way I like. I'm going to do the Northeast here. Let's show you the Northeast. There you go. Now, this blew me away. I mean, I was expecting much of New Jersey to be in the white, and the Hudson Valley, and maybe yellow out further west over Pennsylvania. Look at this. We have abnormally dry conditions all across eastern New York. We actually have moderate drought. And, Leon Probitsky, for example, and others who are living on Long Island, they probably say, yeah, I would agree with that because, all the heavy rains that were hitting New Jersey and the Hudson Valley were missing Long Island. And there was hardly anything going on Long Island while all of that was going on. So now they find themselves in a moderate drought situation, which I'll show you New York State specifically. And here you go. So moderate drought across all of Long Island up to I-287 in Westchester. Southern Westchester is in the moderate drought zone. Northern Westchester, Rockland, Orange, Putnam, and Points North, Dutchess, and Ulster, and Sullivan, all in abnormally dry conditions. And again, the runoff is probably the only thing I can think of, Joe.
Yeah, you need a soaking. When it pours buckets, it all it does is it rolls out, goes into the sewer, particularly if the ground is dry. So you need one of those 24-hour soaking rains where you spread out, an inch or two over 24 hours that has time to really soak into the ground. And in between all this, of course, when they weren't getting the thunderstorms, the rest of the time it was either the sun was out or it was just very warm and humid. The ground might have been dry to begin with and like cement. We saw with the California the whole everything that went on in California with all the rain and snow that they had. How long did it take for the drought maps to catch up? I mean, it took virtually the entire winter.
The only places on the New Jersey map that are not in drought or not in abnormally dry conditions, southern sections of Ocean County, southern and western sections of Burlington County. Everybody else is in the yellow. Everybody else in New Jersey, abnormally dry. And in fact, near Sandy Hook, this zone here, and right along the Hudson River, immediately adjacent to New York City, we have moderate drought. So there you go, moderate drought also across southern sections of New Jersey. So even though, again, we've had, or saw reports a couple of weeks ago of like 3 to 6, 4 to 7 inches, people floating around on their street in rowboats or whatever. In spite of all of that, we still have abnormally dry conditions in the Garden State.
Well, let's see what happens after Sunday.
And if you want to just take a look here nationwide, the places that are really, really in bad shape in terms of drought, severe drought, in fact, Kansas, portions of eastern Nebraska, and also portions of central Missouri. This area right here, right smack in the nation's midsection, right smack in the heartland of the U.S., is going through the worst of it. And remember last year at this time, the places that had the severe drought were New Mexico and Arizona and most of California. But again, all of what happened over the winter season, even though now we're in the thick of things in terms of dry conditions, heading for the middle part of the summer, in spite of all of that, California's in pretty darn good shape, and so is Arizona and New Mexico. How things can change over a span of just 1 year's time.
Yep. All right, let's take a look at the upper air for the next few days and for the weekend, so it sets up this whole thing for Sunday. I'm starting to think, Joe, that they're going to also have to talk about the possibility of some severe thunderstorms in the mix too, because if you look at the I always like to look at the 700 millibar, and tomorrow with this weak front, you'll notice the yellow and brown spots are all areas where you're getting bursts of wind, these little jet streaks. That develop, and sometimes when you get a concentration of jet streaks, you oftentimes can see some severe weather as with straight line wind, and that all mixes down. But there's nothing really much going on for tomorrow from that respect. But nonetheless, there could be certainly some thunderstorms around. There's for Saturday, you can see there's a little bit of a streak of yellow there that runs from upstate New York down into southern Pennsylvania. But again, nothing really to write home about. But then as we move on to Sunday, take a look at this. For Sunday afternoon and Sunday evening, all of a sudden you got all these dark brown, this is 45 to 50 knot winds from eastern shores of Lake Ontario down through central and eastern Pennsylvania, northwest New Jersey, and all down into Chesapeake Bay and eastern Virginia. So looking at that, I mean, that would certainly indicate to me that that there's some risk that there could be certainly some heavier thunderstorms, if not for the rain, not just rain, maybe even some gusty winds to deal with as this upper trough and shortwave goes by. Actually goes almost negatively tilted. If you look right here, you can kind of see it right there. That's where the trough axis is. And the other thing, and I'll just widen out really quick. Let me just switch over to the 500 millibar map. But we keep talking about these troughs in the eastern part of the United States, and when you go forward in time, I mean, I'll go back first just to give you a sense of where we're coming from the last few days. Troughs dropping into the eastern part of the United States. Here's the one for the weekend. And then that goes by, and then as that lifts up, there's you still have that jet, that active Canadian jet that wants to drop into the eastern part of the United States toward the end of next week, and even beyond that, still hanging with some troughing there in the long range period. Ridges don't, if a ridge even tries to build for a brief time, like it does indicate here around the 18th or 19th, in the East Show, there's another short wave that's running down through southeastern Canada that's just going to squash it. This pattern we've been in looks to be a continuation of the same thing for the next couple of weeks. We're just going to be seeing weather systems probably coming through every couple of days and bringing with it threats for showers and storms.
Yeah, I would agree that the second half of Sunday into the first half of Monday, watch out because there could be some locally strong thunderstorms. Maybe not necessarily the type that are accompanied by hail or high winds or whatever. But certainly, I think we could very well see downpours, or may I use the term drownpours
Yes.
to describe how heavy the rains could be from later Sunday on into the first part of Monday.
Here's tomorrow, and you see the area that SPC with the marginal risk in upstate New York and into northwestern Vermont. Looks like part of the energy goes to the north. Then you've got some energy from to the Delmarva Peninsula down into the Carolinas and Georgia, and there's a sort of gap in between. Saturday, they fire up a little bit. The European model, by the way, was a little more vigorous with thunderstorm development both Friday and Saturday. But look at Sunday as this shortwave comes up. I mean, the GFS really goes to town here, Joe, on Sunday evening.
Right.
Very impressive looking, radar, what it thinks the radar is going to look like Sunday evening from over eastern Pennsylvania into the Catskills, the Hudson Valley, particularly north of 84, and then almost looks like they has some sort of a snaking line that goes from there south into eastern North Carolina. That looks very vigorous. And then another vigorous line of area of storms from northwest Alabama down through central Mississippi and northern Louisiana, northeast Texas, all part of that same complex. And then it lifts out. And then after that, there was a second system that the models were trying to lift up behind it for Monday night and Tuesday. They've kind of, early Tuesday, they've sort of backed away from that and shoving that low further to the east and south, because those storms cross Alabama and Georgia and then move off the coast. So, if this is correct, after the system goes out of here Monday morning, it'll dry out for Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday before we start of next week, before we start to see any another chance maybe for some showers and thunderstorms late next week.
And and in fact, what we're looking at that's being telegraphed now for Sunday night. I should point out that like 4 or 5 days ago, that looked like it was going to happen Saturday.
Yeah.
And then everything, and of course, like once you go beyond 5 days, the accuracy and the timing and everything goes way off. But there was some signals that we were going to see something like this, and now it's just been put off by a day to Sunday, and it may be put off a little longer as we're still we're still we're still 3 days away. So the odds are that we're honing in now on that time frame of later Sunday and Sunday night for that very potent heavy rain system that may be affecting, again, a good part of the tri-state area and much of the northeastern states as well.
Looking at the GFS precip from this run, that dark purple is like 4.5, 5 inches in that little smudge there in northwest New Jersey, northeastern Pennsylvania, right in there. So that's where your max precip is. But anything in white is at least 2. So the amounts are far less near the coast. So this might be another case where if you're on Long Island, you'll see a whole lot less than you would for inland spots. Although the European, to be fair, it wants to be a little bit further to the east with everything. So we'll have to figure that out tomorrow and Saturday and see how it plays. But somebody's going to get clobbered by rain out of this, one way or the other.
Indeed.
Okay, Leon Probitsky hits the tip jar. Thank you, Leon. Most appreciated. Now, who has Briller Jeopardy? Do you or do I?
I had it last night, didn't I? So
no, we didn't do it last night.
The night before.
Okay, so then I have it. So give me a second here while I find it. Okay. Of course, whenever I need to load Messenger, it takes forever for it to load, and it finally has. Okay, so here we go. Yes, I do have it. So, okay, so here we go with Briller Jeopardy. So everybody put on your thinking caps. All right. Now, on this edition of Briller Jeopardy, there were 7 hurricanes. 7. Not 5, not 6, not 8, 7 hurricanes that made landfall in the United States in the month of July since the year 2000. Now, you only need to get 3 of them to be considered an expert. Okay? So, anyone care to name the storms?
I'll start off with Arthur. Remember Arthur?
That is correct. Hurricane Arthur do you remember the year?
Oh, oh. 2019?
2014.
2014.
Arthur in 2014. Um, let's see. The chat board folks are very slow. No, Katrina was not in July. It was in August. This is not an easy one, and I'll tell you something. If you were giving me these, I would, my brain is gone. There was a time where I could name them. That time is long past. They have faded out of my dimming memory, which gets dimmer by the day. This is a tough one. Carol DeCara got one. Carol DeCara got one. Hurricane Dennis. That is correct. No, yes, Dennis. I'm sorry, Hurricane Dennis in 2005. So we've got 2 of them. So let's see if we can get a third one. So that's very good. Now, this is just from the year 2000 on. So Carol was in 1954 and David was in 77 or 78 or 79. 79.
David was 1979.
Okay. No, Andrew was not in this. Andrew was late August. Bell was in 76. This is from the year 2000 on. Okay. So I'm just running. I'm scanning here. Okay. No, Hugo was in 1989. This is from 2000 on. Christina Peters says, "Wait, that means I was in Miller Place for David." And remembers that Bell was in 76.
It was David. And Frederick, which came after David.
Right. Exactly. No, Gloria's nowhere near. Tommy Clams. Emily, no. Floyd, no. Sandy, no. This is not an easy one. Matthew, no. Ivan, no. Hi, Ivan. I'm ready to record. Oh, quickly. Inside joke. All right. This is gonna. No, Hurricane Charlie was not in July. Elsa, no. Okay, I think I'm gonna have to just start. We'll go from the bottom to the top. Okay. Are you ready, Joe?
I'm all set.
There was Hurricane Claudette in 2003.
Okay.
Dennis, we got 2005. Hurricane Cindy in 2005 also.
By the way, was Alex on the list?
No.
No?
No.
Oh, well.
In 2008, Dolly in 2008.
Hello, Dolly.
Arthur, as you pointed out, in 2014. Hurricane Barry in 2019. Okay. And the last one was actually in 2020, which was a pretty busy first half of the year, Joe, because Hannah, the H storm, was in July, and that was in 2020.
So that was all of them?
And that was it. Those are the 7 hurricanes since July, the year 2000, that have made landfall in the United States.
You know what's amazing to me is that the vast majority of the names that were listed on the chat board were before 2000.
Yes.
You would think that storms that were closer to 2023 or in
this. The short-term memory is the first thing to go.
Well, it just goes to show you that a lot of these storms that a lot of the folks mentioned on the chat board were memorable or famous storms that stood out in their younger lives.
Yes. So, well, if Colorado State University is correct, we've got 15 storms to go. Well, no, I'm sorry. 14 because we had the subtropical storm in January because that
Okay.
counts, and then Arlene, which was just a please, that was a spare me. That was a Yeah, that was one for the one for a page in the book that goes on the coffee table. So that was two, and then we've had the Brett and Cindy. So we've already had four. So according to CSU, excuse me, we will have 14 more between now and the end of hurricane season. So, and you're right, what we said at the beginning, th- things don't seem to be working the way they should.
Right. The good old fashioned, you know, various laws or rules or whatever. We've been breaking rules, let's put it that way, over the last 4 or 5 years.
Yep. Well, we'll break some more, and maybe a few tables and some glasses along the way.
Hmm.
Anything else going on in your life?
No, as I said, I mowed the lawn today in extreme heat. Well, not extreme heat, but it was hot enough, and I can't believe it's Thursday already. So I guess we've got a couple of days off, and we'll meet again, hopefully, the good Lord willing, at 11 a.m. on Sunday.
That is correct. We will be back Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, and the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow, the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Get one and join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's on the descriptor to this video. Use the referral link and the coupon code. Don't forget the coupon code, Joe and Joe Weather Show, because if you use it, you will get
10% off.
and Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York. Since we're talking about hurricanes, not a bad time to maybe kind of do an inventory and make sure you got all the stuff you need in case there is a hurricane threat at some point. 631-756-1125. You can't find better prices anywhere. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Yep. So today was the first day in 5 weeks that I did not do anything in my yard landscape wise. I didn't pull a weed. I didn't whack a weed. I didn't lay down a flower bed. I didn't go hunting for stones to border the flower bed. I decided today was going to be a day where I was going to do absolutely nothing. And that's kind of what I did. Absolutely nothing.
Well, good for you.
Okay.
We deserve a day like that every once in a while.
Oh, no question. All right, folks. Everybody have a great Friday and a great Saturday. We'll see you Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Be on time. Bye-bye.
Bye, folks.